Today, we're so excited to welcome Dr. Gwen Westerman to talk about her poetry. Not only is it National Poetry Month, but it is also the last week of National Library Week, and we're so lucky to have such an incredible speaker to honor these important days of recognition. This program is also highlighting our Indigenous Spotlight collection of Turtle Island, which is located on our second floor, and it features a variety of books in all genres and for all ages, written by and about Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island. Please visit this collection during our normal library hours. So before we begin, I would like to first read our land recognition statement. Excuse me while I get this out. Before we begin this program, I would like to first acknowledge that the La Crosse Public Library occupies the ancestral lands of the Ho-Chunk, who have stewarded this time since land immemorial. The city of La Crosse occupies land that was once a prairie that was home to a band of Ho-Chunk. In 1830, President Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act in an attempt to forcibly and often violently remove Indigenous peoples from their ancestral lands, located east of the Mississippi River, to occupied territories west of the river. Throughout the 1830s and the 1840s, the federal government conducted a series of 6 attempts to forcibly remove local Ho-Chunk by steamboat via the Mississippi River to reservations in Iowa, Minnesota, South Dakota, and finally to Nebraska. The historic steamboat landing where this took place is now Spence Park in downtown La Crosse, which is across the street from the Charmont. However, many of La Crosse's Ho-Chunk found their way back to their homeland here in La Crosse, and eventually the federal and local governments moved on to new strategies to eradicate Indigenous folks and culture from the newly established United States of America. If you are not in the city of La Crosse, I encourage you to research the Indigenous land that your home, community, and place of work all occupy. If you would like help with this research, we have staff at our library who can assist you in the archives and local history department. I would like to take some time to make a few housekeeping notes. Our restrooms are located in the back, and we have snacks and drinks located right over there. Please help yourself, we have a lot. Feel free to get up and move around as you need to throughout this program. The rest of the library is closed, so please exit the building the way that you came in. Gwen will be holding a Q&A after her talk, and then we'll also have some time to sign some books. And speaking of books, we will be giving away 30 books tonight. And if you look around, I'm not super good at estimating numbers, but kind of looks like we have about 30 people. And this is a giveaway from the Minnesota Humanities Center. So thank you for them for doing that. So at the end of the Q&A, we'll have you all, we'll go to the next steps with that, okay? So just a little something to entice you. Dr. Gwen Westerman holds her bachelor's and master's in English from Oklahoma State University and a PhD in English from the University of Kansas. She teaches American and Native Nation literature, technical communications, and humanities to undergraduate and graduate students at Minnesota State University, Mankato. She received the Douglas R. Moore Faculty Research Award for her work on Dakota history and language, and is a distinguished faculty scholar in recognition of her work as a scholar, a poet, and an artist. Gwen's poems, essays, and short stories appear in numerous publications, including the Norton Anthology of Native Nations Poetry, the Minnesota issue of Quilt Folk, and New Poets of Native Nations. Her poetry collection, Follow the Blackbird, was published in 2013, and Songs Blood Deep in 2023. She is an enrolled member of the Sisseton Wahpeton Dakota Oyate, her father's people, and a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, her mother's people. She was appointed by Governor Tim Walz as Poet Laureate of Minnesota in September of 2021. Please welcome Gwen Westerman.
Amitakiapi, Ampetukinde, Ampetuwan Yupiak, He Mayu Iokpi. It's a beautiful day, and that always makes me happy, and I'm happy to see all of you as well. Our Dakota language is very close to our relatives' Ho-Chunk language, and so I saw nodding heads when I spoke. So you heard a lot about me. Those are things that that's my professional life. My artistic life is in my poetry and in my visual art. And at this point, I'm really much more excited about my artistic life than my professional life. I've been in Minnesota since 1991. Neither of my parents spoke English before they were sent away to boarding schools as young children. My mother in Oklahoma, my dad in practically every boarding school in North Dakota and South Dakota, and even Nebraska, I think. Yeah, he was naughty. And they met at Haskell Indian Institute in Lawrence, Kansas. So that's how I come to be an Okie for most of my life, because that's where my mother's people are from. And when I moved to Minnesota and I told my dad, Chris, and my uncle Floyd, I called them and I said, I have a job. I have a job in Mankato, Minnesota, and in California and in South Dakota. There was silence on the other end of the line. And I thought, why aren't you happy for me? I didn't say that, but both of them said the same thing. We'll see how long you last there. You know what they do to Indians there, don't you? And I said, no. They said, well, you'll find out. I'm not loud enough? Oh, okay. Do we have to turn it up? Is that, I better not touch it. A little closer. Okay. So anyway, they said, we'll see how long you last. And I had no idea about the history in Mankato or in Minnesota. I had no idea what I was walking into, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I was at home and I did not know why. So I've lived in Minnesota now longer than I've lived anywhere else in my life combined. And they were both very proud of me for the work that I've done since I've been up this way. And just so you know, I come from a long line of overactors. Okay. I'm going to read two pieces from Follow the Blackbirds to kind of set the tone for songs Blood Deep. And then I'm a teacher. If you twitch, I'll call on you. But I'll kind of break up my reading with opportunities for you to ask some questions along the way as well, instead of having to save them all to the end. Follow the Blackbirds. The last time I saw her confined to a hospital bed in compact tribal housing, my mother's mother lay evaporating before my eyes. I don't even feel alive, she said. She asked for water, and between small sips from a straw, slowly smiled. Grandma told us to look for blackbirds. She said that they always go to water. You won't ever be lost or thirsty if you follow the blackbirds. Eyes closed, I drink in her fluttering voice, trying to quench the imminent drought as flashes of red and yellow burn across a darkened view. Don't forget me, she said, and don't forget, when you're thirsty, follow the blackbirds. I've lived along the Minnesota River for basically more 30 years now. And I am drawn to water. I don't like the ocean because if you look out at the ocean, that's all you see is water. I need banks and trees and to know that I can step out and not get carried away. But the river has been very important to me, rivers in general. And now where we live, south of Good Thunder, our ravine on two sides is the Maple River. So we have all kinds of birds and animals to watch and listen to. And then just to hear rushing water back there when the river is full is one of the most comforting sounds I can think of. So this is called genetic code. On the edge of a dream, the songs came, condensed from the fog like dewdrops on cattails. They formed perfectly clear. Whispering through leaves, heavy voices rise up, drift beyond night toward the silent dawn, and sing. Hekta hana derun tipi, heu heu hneum kiksuya pikte, ampetudena derun tipi, hecha ohni undo wampikte. Always on still morning air they come, connected by memories and song. So from the new collection, Songs Bled Deep, the next one I'm working on is also about song. So I don't know if somebody's going to say, are you ever going to have a book that doesn't have a song in the title? I don't know. We'll see. First song. Sitting on a quilt made from her husband's work pants, spread out on the ground behind the house he bought for her. On a late autumn afternoon, my grandma taught me to sing. Une lana iu weji iga guya he na kochosa wiu lo se iga guya hona. Then she told me it is a sin to be greedy, to hoard when others are needy. Always share something, always. A cup of coffee, some wild mint tea, just a glass of water, a bowl of soup, a few boiled eggs, a piece of bread, a clean towel, some warm socks, a spool of thread, a length of calico, some dried corn, a bit of meat, a wooden spoon, a small pail, a basket, a gentle touch, a prayer, a song. Nothing fancy, just a token that we care for each other in good times and bad. Share, not give or take, but share whatever you have, no matter how small. To accept a gift is to know how we are related, to understand our need to be connected, to learn how to receive love, even if we think we don't deserve it. Blood memory. Once in school, they taught us that Navajo mothers buried their babies' umbilical cords beneath the Hogan threshold so they would always know where home is. My mother kept my siblings' cords, black shriveled little twigs, in a small box along with their baby teeth and diaper pins. Once I asked her, "Where is mine?" "Oh," she said, "I threw it away a long time ago." Perhaps that explains the feeling that I did not belong there. Why I wondered how a different family might be. Why I wandered through books or on my bike alone. Why I left home at 17 and never really went back. Why I migrated north to Kansas City, where once at an art show, I bought a watercolor of a bluff resplendent with fall colors, wondering how I knew that place seemed like home. I wandered farther north, where the bluffs along the Minnesota River, resplendent with fall colors, were exactly the same as the watercolor I bought years before. And somehow I knew this place. Once I stood across from the bluff along the Minnesota River, offering food and prayers, when the soles of my shoes seemed to dissolve, my feet and the ground were joined. Gentle hands reached up, grasped my ankles, and anchored me there. I knew this place where the land claimed me, no longer wondering, no longer wandering. I was home. I was a chemistry major as an undergraduate because I wanted to go to law school or be a doctor. Once I met my peers who said they also wanted to go to law school, I decided I'm going to go the doctor route. That was until I took physical chemistry my senior year in college. Who passed physical chemistry? I admire you. That was the end of my chemistry major. I had enough credits to have a chemistry minor. I also have a philosophy minor, but I switched my major to English because my advisor, who advised Native students, said, "Look at all of the courses you already have here. You love to write, you love to read. Why don't you be an English major?" And I'm like, oh, how am I going to explain that to my parents? An English major. But it served me well. I've got a strong technical and scientific background. And Oklahoma State had one of the first technical communication programs in the country. And it was a perfect fit for me. So I have done a lot of technical communication work with engineering firms, with financial services firms, for a tank washing company that washed tanks for trucks, for the School Sisters of Notre Dame, just a wide range of technical writing kinds of projects where here's the information we need to give our audience. How can you set it up so they will be able to use it? Chemistry and physics show up in my poetry a lot now. It's kind of my retribution. This is called covalent bonds. Covalent bonds are the strongest bonds in chemistry. Okay. We are dream carriers, child bearers, those burdens born with hope and intensity under the gravity of responsibility, history, and love, not guilt, love, and hope for those who will dream and share these burdens born. We do not give up willingly, but attract and repel, balance and share stronger in that bond of love. That was a question. What would you like to know about me?
The poets that influenced you?
Were there poets that influenced me? Wordsworth, Chaucer, because I loved his bodiness. I was partial to British poets as an undergraduate. And then when I started my doctoral work, I went the other way toward American poets. Whitman can tell a story like nobody's business. And I think I'm drawn toward those poets who tell stories. I did not read a native poet until I was in my doctoral program. Yeah, I didn't know such a thing existed. Although, you run the powwow circuit, you hear songs, you hear people sing. I have a relative who writes songs and is basically a poet as well. And I'm like, well, I've never heard of an American Indian poet before. And then that opened up a whole other world for me. My favorite poets, Billy Elliot, Hyde Erdrich, Leanne Howe, Gordon Henry. Well, okay, I'll quit there. I don't have any that I don't like. Yeah. Who knows haiku? Okay, all right. Do you know about Tonka? No, okay. You know about Tonka. All right, good. Haiku, 3 lines, 17 syllables, right? Okay. Tonka is 5 lines, 31 syllables. Haiku for me was just like never quite enough. And when I found Tonka, I was just really excited because it's instant gratification. 5 lines, 31 syllables. So basically it's like 5, 7, 5, 7, 7. And I write a lot in Tonka form because it's instant gratification. So here are 2. Harvest Phantoms. Birds settle in the cornfield as evening draws near. They rustle the drying leaves, hop from stalk to stalk, then stillness covers the land. In the dark, sound of combines blow over the fields. Dried leaves of corn stalks skitter down the road like ghosts under the waning moonlight. Well, this one is also about cornfields. I'll skip that one. The impermanence of light. A surprise among the grass after a soft rain. A purple flower appears, its center a star shining in the waning sun. Perhaps Monet was inspired by such simple sights. Red leaves floating in the grass, subtle changing shades, the impermanence of light. Aren't they great? There's just enough there. So you gotta try it. This book is divided by seasons, and I start with fall and end with summer. Pandemic wind. November storm turned sharp and deadly frigid. Before I can reach the house, leaves fighting to hold on, lose their last fragile connections, and are blasted beyond the yard? What holds us here in the brunt of unseen forces? Our connective threads ravaged, we struggle to hold on to everything we thought we knew and are dying in the cold. Giving thanks. By proclamation of a president, the people will give thanks. What has happened to a people who must be ordered to give thanks on a given day for overabundance, surrounded by distractions of food preparations, plastic decorations, smiling amid red and yellow leaves, ignorant of the sacrifices, ultimate betrayals by proclamation of a president of a people who first gave thanks? Nothing but the truth. Power concedes nothing without a demand. Frederick Douglass. Power concedes even though the majority did not rule. Debunked stories repeated as fact become alternative truth. Nothing without or within can progress beyond fear, turning struggle into process, unblurring lines between fact and fiction. Then a demand to be heard, to be recognized, to take active measures, and to recover what truth really means. Storyteller, noun. Definition: 1, narrator. 2, liar. 3, informant, as in oral history. Also stool pigeon, sneak, mole, spy. If that is how Mr. Webster defined and described it in these United States of America, it is no wonder our storytellers have no place. Our definition: 1, culture keeper. 2, tradition bearer. 3, rememberer, as in oral history. Also teacher, helper, moral compass, poet. That is how our sources define and describe it in these indigenous homelands where wonder and story make a place for us all. Conversion conversations. Hekta ahana dana eapi. They said, we come to share our love of God. Teach us your language. We gave you our hand in friendship. We gave you our God in love. They said, we come to take the land you gave us in our treaties. We gave you our names in trust. We gave you our word in belief. Then they said, now we will tell your stories in our own language. We had nothing left to say. So we're done with winter now. We're going to go into spring. I like shape poems. I don't know if you can see this very well, but this is how we mark the sky and the earth. What's above is also below. And this is called Hana Nkiksuyapi. We are star people. We chanchbi oyati, he untahampi. Our legacy is as diverse, as present, as absent as stars in the sky. In the brilliant light of day, we see just one star, our sun. But those other stars are not gone. At sunset, they appear again. Bright city lights may darken them, but they are not gone. Our point of reference veils or clears our vision to create beauty from tragedy, healing from trauma is not a battle for supremacy of a single story, but a process of new understandings that evolve as we evolve. But where does true memory reside? Our past is recorded in our way of life, in our traditions, and in the living hearts of our people. Our stories shine there like stars, and we remember those. At Flanders State Park. Oh, I forgot, I'm in Wisconsin. How many people have been to Flanders State Park? Sorry. Oh, okay, one. But you know of it, okay. It's west of Mankato. Okay, there. At Flanders State Park, a small white stone proclaims here was born the first white child in Minnesota. Date verified, witnesses, no monument erected, no obelisks, no great rotunda or basilica, a small white stone, a remnant of snow at its base. Yet all around are thousands upon thousands times thousands of small brown stones bearing witness that here were born the first children in Minnesota Makoche. The first word whispered into their ears by their mothers, Dani Kota. Lullabies heard first in Dakota. The cries of joy, exclamations of beauty, and welcome heard first. Wankang Ija, they are holy like God. Another question. Yes.
The thoughts and feelings that you hope take from it.
What are some of the thoughts and feelings that I hope people take from my poetry? Should I tell them what my standard is? That's my husband over there. I hope that it will touch them, touch my readers in a way, touch you in a way that you feel something. Anger, joy, grief, sadness, happiness, but to feel something from these words. And I know I've done my job as a poet if I make people cry in a good way. Another question? Okay.
Relevant, much more. What are your thoughts on that?
So what are my thoughts on the elevation, the recent elevation, last 5 years or so, of Native artists and writers. We've always been here. We knew we were here. I think there is there's a better understanding now of the diversity among our peoples, that we aren't all the same, even though we grew up watching the same Westerns on TV and the same Indians. We laugh when we watch some of those old Westerns from the 60s and 70s, because sometimes they speak Lakota. And it's like, whoa, that's not what he said. So, you know, so the other guys in the TV show will say, oh, well, he said this. And it's like, no, he didn't. But we're beads, feathers, and bones. You know, that's who we were because of the way we were portrayed. But we always known we were more than that. We come from generations of artists and poets and singers, song makers, drum makers, orators. And today we can stand up here and do things like this and not have to wear feathers and beads. My daughter made this, so. But there's a recognition that we're architects and we're engineers and we're teachers and we're attorneys and we're doctors and artists, and we paint, we sculpt, we write plays and musicals, and I think there's that. I think that's part of it. I'm not an expert, but we're in more places because people have begun to recognize that we are multifaceted. And even though my uncle played an Indian on TV, we're more than that. Yeah, so was he. Okay, I'm going to take you back to Oklahoma, since I have pandemic poems in this collection. This is 1918 Pandemic Ghost. A stranger came up the road to her grandma's house near Malloy Hollow, at the back edge of the woods on the post road close to Bunch. It appeared quickly as she and her sister played in their grandma's yard, pigs rooting near the split rail fence for a cool place to lay. She ran to the woods when Liza screamed, "Gila, Asgili, Nula." They were too afraid to move, to even whisper, unsure where their grandma was as the figure drew closer. With white hair and skin, its legs covered by white boots, a long white cape flowed behind. As the ghost came close, they heard the screen door open as their grandma stepped out onto the porch to stand. They were too afraid to breathe. Then she spoke to it, and it spoke to her. They could not hear what was said. Does anyone in your house have the flu? Is anyone coughing, feverish? Have you been to Stillwell? 9 people died there last week from the Spanish flu. The schools are being closed. Have you been to Tahlequah? 14,000 people in Tahlequah have the flu. When the voices stopped, the girls came to the corner of the house and looked down the road to see the ghost float away in the fall breeze. Their grandma called them up to the porch of the house. People are dying. Even more people are sick. It is a very bad thing. That nurse came to say we must be very careful. They were more afraid, she and her sister Liza, of the first ghost white person they had ever seen. I heard that story from the time I was, well, much shorter. I've already told you about my obsession with Tonkas. Tonkas work really well in Dakota too. And so for a while there, I would write a Tonka every day. I would write first in Dakota, and then I would make the English version the next day. And the next day I would write in English first, and then make the Dakota version the next day. And I did that for quite a while. Ampetu techa, pecha. Odowan ota na wachum he han wekta iyopi, iyo makpi. Ampetu techa hecha. Zikara dowampi. At dawn, I awoke to the sound of bird songs floating on the breeze, the promise of a new day carried in their melody. Wiakaska chaga wabadake. Owanya gwashte chistina a washtena wiki oyakpa kpa. On my morning walk, I see feathers in the ice, sparkling in the sun. Small and beautiful they shine all along the gravel road. Now, those are not literal translations, but the idea is there. And some people in my first book, Follow the Blackbirds, I put the Dakota orthography and how to pronounce the sounds. I put a glossary. I translated everything that was in Dakota into English. This time, I didn't. And somebody asked me about that the other day, and I said, well, you know, if they want to know what it says or how to pronounce it, they can ask me and I will tell them. It's also part of my scholarly training that when you read an article and there's a paragraph in German, you're expected to be able to read it. If it's in French, you're expected to be able to read it. I had to have 2 additional languages for my PhD. And I thought, well, it's my turn. I expect you to know it. You know more Dakota words, more Ho-Chunk words, more indigenous words than you realize. You probably use them every day. I had the privilege of being able to participate in a show in South Dakota on the anniversary of the Treaty of Fort Laramie. And so there were, now I forget how many, there was a visual artist and a poet assigned to each article of the treaty to interpret it. So I did Article 10 of the Fort Laramie Treaty. And this is called the Wikchemina Psalm Wikchemina. From time to time, year to year, Dakudana owas unkiksuyapikte. In lieu of all treaties heretofore made, wowapi owas unkarapi dead, and the manner of their delivery, dana storingyapi a ungogachnigapi. In testimony of all which we receive, dako owas unchipi unyuhapikte. Each person, each family, each lodge, tuwe dana owas wicha unkiksuyapikte, shall be named, entitled to be present. Wana, 4 years, 12 years, 14 years, 30 years, tokatakia, in no event withdrawn or discontinued, ohani. Each lodge, each family settled. Daku dana owas echunk umpikde. Permanently. He nipikde. So you heard the English, you heard the Dakota. This is what it meant in Dakota. We will remember these things. All the words written here, we know and understand them. We will have everything we need. We will remember these people now, in the future, always. We do these things, so we will live. So that is kind of a commentary on the translations of treaties and the idea that people knew what they were signing. Because when you translate those things, like, well, yeah, we will remember these things. We'll have everything we need. And we do these things so we will live. That's the first time I've read that one in public. My father's community is Siston Wapton, Dakota Oyate. So I travel back and forth between South Dakota for a number of years. For a while, my husband Gwen Westerman taught Dakota language at Siston. Is there any place you haven't taught? Prairie Island, Shakopee, Lower Sioux, Upper Sioux, Siston, Blandrew. He gets around more than I do. Okay. So I've driven up and down I-29 a bunch. And I'm always looking off. Nobody likes to ride with me when I drive because I'm like, well, look over there. There are 3 deer standing next to the road. And they're like, where? I said, back in the woods about 20 feet. Can you see them? I'm like, Mom, keep your eyes on the road. Billboard warning. Racing down the interstate, music blaring, tires humming, landscapes and billboards blur, unnoticed by uncaring carloads, intent on getting somewhere sooner than later. Then, there on the right, in white against black, ominous words 6 feet high flash in the twinkling of an eye. When you die, you will see God. Hebrews 9:27. Knee-jerk, whiplash, deceleration to meet the posted speed limit, not the heavenly destination. Then there on the left, in black against white, menacing words 6 feet high, glare in a sarcastic tone. Have a good day. Okay. Odowan Tokahea. Retracing the steps of my Dakota ancestors along a route to commemorate their forced march, I sang these words before I knew what they meant, before I knew the history of the women, the children, the old people in the aftermath of the war, that war. Makasi tomini dakod wicho haki o tehige. Ina ate damakota kecha mnihed michiel. Marking each mile with a prayer stick, speaking the names of the families, singing this song 150 times in 7 days for 6 years. My grandma died before I was born, yet her grandma's stories imprinted in my cell memory, were remembered. Cleansing breath, everybody. I was asked to write a piece for the Friends of the Mississippi River for one of their galas. And it's like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. But I said yes. And so there were a lot of performers that night. There were a lot of speakers. And because I work so much with the DNR, I know a lot about the life in the rivers themselves, the plants. We were fortunate enough to work with the DNR at Minneopa State Park to reintroduce a bison herd there, just west of Mankato. And when we did that, we told them that it needed to be done in a Dakota way because they were our relatives and they were coming home. So we sang for them when they came off the trailer. There were prayers said for them. Then we fed everybody, the truck drivers, the veterinarians, the news media crews, all of the DNR staff. We had soup and can't remember what else. We had soup and cake and cornbread probably. Those are my Okie roots. I serve cornbread everywhere. It's easier than fry bread. But I've learned a lot about the wildlife around where I live, about the plants and what lives in the water. And there's a muscle called a spectacle case muscle. So I don't have a glasses case, but yeah, you know, kind of looks like this, spectacle case muscles. And they thought they were extinct because the river had been dammed above the St. Croix Falls. And they spray, eject their eggs into the water, and then they are caught in the gills of fish. And then the fish swim downstream and then drop them, and they make more mussels. But when they put the dam in, those fish couldn't come up to where the mussels were anymore. So they thought that they were gone. But they found 3 of them, and they can live to be more than 200 years old. And they're like trees. The rings of a mussel shell will tell you how old it is. So next time you find a mussel shell along the river, you can figure out how old it is. So this is the piece I wrote for the river and for our relatives that live in the water, that fly, that live on the land. Breathe deep and sing. We sing for the mussels. We, the otters and beavers, the frogs and dragonflies, the water birds and songbirds, the coyotes too. We breathe deep and sing for the mussels who are the lungs of the Mississippi River. Our river, polluted by sewage and wastewater, dredged and dammed, pockmarked by dead zones of chemicals and dyes, banked by the edge of destruction. Our river, a global superflyway, it flows through the heart of us, flowed through the heart of us for centuries, beyond memory. Through wetlands and backwaters, communities and economies, plagued by invasive species, invasive humans, environmental degradation that flowed through the heart of us. Our river, it calls to us, it beckons us. Our dreams flow along with it. So we sing for the mussels, we, the otters and beavers, the frogs and dragonflies, the water birds and songbirds, the coyotes too. We breathe deep and sing for the mussels who are the silent sentinels of our river. They hold the stories and the pain of our river 40, 70, 200 years ago. Like the trees above them along the banks of our river, the rings of the mussel shells are a living record of our environment and of our river. They mark the resilience, the struggles, the restoration of floodplains and river bottoms, the restorations of health and hearts. How do we heal our river without healing ourselves? Our river, it calls to us, it beckons us, our dreams flow along with it. Its water shapes us, embraces us, and is our first medicine. So we sing for the mussels, we, the otters and beavers, the frogs and dragonflies, the water birds and songbirds, the coyotes too. Breathe deep and sing with us for the mussels, and we will sing for you. Pidamaya. Oh, Pidamaya. Thank you. Yeah. Now, official question time.
If anyone wants a microphone, I have one.
I'm interested in your writing process. You suggested you write every day? At a
I
certain
did.
time of day?
I did.
And what do you try to accomplish? Those kind of things. You burn incense?
No, I drink a lot of tea. um, I did have a very specific process for a while, but I'm a very undisciplined writer. I have journals. I do a lot of free writing. And then I think it was October. Is that that's like post poetry month on Instagram. So then I had a specific goal. That's when I would write a tanka in English and then translate it to Dakota and then post a picture with it. And I did that for 30 days. I love field notes, these little notebooks, because they have graph paper in them, and then I can write straight lines. I don't have to worry about running off the edge of the page. But I also write on scraps of paper. I write in the back of my calendar. I write on anything that is handy if I don't have my very specific tools. So I'm not a good role model. Although, do what works. Do what works for you. So, okay. Another question? Remember, if you twitch, I'll call on you. There you go. You twitched. Yes. Mm-hmm. That's in conjunction with my Dakota culture and knowledge. More because I was doing that long before I was poet laureate, and my husband and I worked together with the DNR on a lot of different projects, incorporating language into signage, worked on the renovation of the visitor center at Pipestone National Monument, developing text and making sure things that were in there were appropriate for other people to see. So yeah, that's how I got wrangled into that. And it's an amazing opportunity to be in those state parks and be involved in interpreting the land and the water and the animals in the way that we would have interacted with them or still interact with them, rather than just looking at them as specimens and, you know, managed herds. It's more of a complete portrayal of the importance of those lands to all of us, not just Dakota people, but all of us. Okay, green shirt. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. She asked if I would say more about that feeling of being home when I moved to Minnesota. I was the oldest child, and I'm my mother's oldest child, but my grandma raised me the first 3 years. Her husband died unexpectedly, and I think I was kind of her surrogate person to love when she lost him. And then my mom remarried and had 2 more kids, and grew up in Wichita, Kansas, and never felt like I belonged. Went to Oklahoma, felt a whole lot better. If I'm tired or I'm angry, I'll draw. Or when I get around somebody else who draws, it just comes right back. But I moved to Kansas City after I got my master's degree in technical communication, and I worked for a financial services firm. Kansas City is a great place. Still didn't feel like I belonged there. It was not a good thing to be a woman, to be short, and to draw and work in financial services. So I flattened out my draw purposefully. Then the opportunity in Mankato came after I finished my PhD to teach full-time. So that's where I went. And that poem about the watercolor is my direct experience of coming down 169 from the metro area to Mankato. But there was something uneasy there. I didn't know what it was. And then that's why my dad and my uncle said, we'll see how long you last. But there have been other experiences I have had where, for the first time, I felt like I was home, that this was the place where I came from, and this was the place where I belonged. So I don't know how else to describe it, except, you know, standing there in prayer and feeling hands grab my ankles and anchor me there. And I know that sounds kind of, but that's what happened. And obviously it's a place where I was meant to do the work I was put on this earth for. Cause trouble, write poems. Okay. See, I saw another one back there. You guys are being pretty quiet over here.
Oh, my question.
Oh, she did. Oh.
I'm also curious how the natural world might play a part in that. Oh, just give it the portrayal and role of nature, right?
if you know your geography, northern Oklahoma, all the way through Kansas and Nebraska and into Iowa and Minnesota was once part of a vast sea. And those rolling hills and rivers, I don't like to go up north where there are tall pine trees like next to the road like this, and you can't see the horizon. Even though I love going to Duluth and Superior and the Boundary Waters, I just have to have somebody else drive. It has to do with that rolling prairie, and somehow connected to that place without knowing it. And then as I found more and more out about the history and met my other relatives who were here, and even one of them who said, when I tried to ask questions about why I felt this way, one of the elders said, well, there's a lot of good in you. That's why people come to you. So in our genes, in our genetic makeup, I think sometimes. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Yes.
My question is about the humanity.
Mm-hmm.
Question is how do you? I was an English major a long time ago, and I remember when
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I just
Yeah. Well, I'm a first generation college student and a working class kid. Books were my escape, and drawing and art and sewing were my escape. And I think we have a generation who can't read cursive. I had that last spring in the class the humanities seminar that I taught to develop a new exhibit, 8 exhibit panels to explain the significance of the Abraham Lincoln statue in Mankato. And I wrote on the whiteboard one day, and my student raised his hand and he said, I can't read cursive, can you print? And so I would have to print, which was probably worse than my cursive. But I don't have my phone with me, but they're a generation that was raised with a tablet or a cell phone as a babysitter. And I teach Western civilization, from the time we realized we were humans and created cave art up to the Renaissance. And I really focused this time on trying to make a connection that we wouldn't be where we are if it hadn't been for all of these creative people who could think and draw and paint and speculate and do math. We wouldn't be where we are today without them. So how are we going to move forward? about 15 years ago, 10 years ago, our university decided that a BS was more achievable and more desirable than a BA. So that meant students no longer had to have a language to graduate from college, an additional language. That killed our world languages department. But all of the international students who come, they're multilingual. And they come here because they value the education system here and they want to be successful. And they're multilingual. But our students can't read cursive, don't read at all, write their papers on their cell phones. And it's like, how can you do that? I need to be able to go like this and pound my keyboard when I get mad when I'm writing. I wish I had something more positive to say, but my own institution is focusing on how do we get rid of these courses that nobody wants to take. Never mind that this is what helps make us human. So I still teach my humanities classes, and we had the threat this semester that if the undergraduate classes didn't have 15, they would be canceled. And in 2009, 2012, our institution, our president at the university made a commitment to the 4 Dakota communities that Minnesota State Mankato would offer Dakota language, and it would be offered every semester regardless of enrollment. That's how important it was to the place where we lived and the mission of the university. We now are 2 presidents after that, and a provost who came from, well, he lives in Durham, North Carolina, so who said there are no exceptions. No exceptions. And I said, yes, there are. No, there are not. I said, yes, there are. This institution made a commitment to our Dakota communities. Well, we didn't make that. I said, it doesn't matter. The institution made that commitment. But the way we got around it is that we advertised on Facebook and said, Dakota language. For non-degree seeking students, you can sign up and you can take Dakota language with us on Zoom. We have students in Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, all over Minnesota, and had 17. So they couldn't, go after us. So if any of you are in that situation, think about those options of how to bring in additional places, because I don't know where we're going to go if we don't know what it means to be human, because the humanities are not important to us. Even Rosie the robot on the Jetsons had feelings and could talk about art. Sorry, I probably really dated myself there. Okay, are we?
Can take one more. right?
Okay.
So I'm first generation. And I never actually asked why, but I assumed that was mindset that they're gonna have to know it anyway, so let's just start that way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if were you in that same situation, or did you always have that Dakota in life to know?
I was raised, my mom raised me because my mom and dad were divorced after I was born. So my grandma was a fluent first speaker. My mother spoke Cherokee when she went to school. She didn't speak any English. When I graduated from high school, I went to live with my grandma in Oklahoma because I wanted her to teach me the language. because all of her sisters were still fluent. There was a strong community there. There were lots of speakers there in Stillwell and Tahlequah in northeastern Oklahoma. And she said, no, you need to learn English and learn it well so you'll be successful. So I know my name. I know how to say, Osio tohiju dulela awadule. Hello, how are you? I want money. My grandma taught me that. But that's as far as I got there. And then moving to Minnesota, it's been hard work, but there are more Dakota speakers around. My husband is a fluent first language speaker and teacher, and I think it has a lot to do also because I feel like I'm home, and all that language was all around me, and the place names and people that I knew and met, being on the commemorative march, the Women and Children's commemorative march, every other year from 2002 to 2012, and being with elders who were speakers and learning songs, and that I'll be a learner for the rest of my life. But my daughter teaches Dakota language now at South Dakota State University. Yeah. My son lives in New Hampshire. He speaks French and German and Spanish fluently. But he got married and moved away, and he just knows a few things in Dakota. But there's hope. We gotta hold on to some hope. But it's hard work. It's really hard work. So that's why the first poem in here is about my mom's mom, my grandma in Oklahoma, and the first song she taught me. And then the last poem, next to the last poem in this book, is the first song I learned that my aunties taught me in Dakota. And I could sing the song before I knew what the words meant. So that bookends here. The first song I ever learned was not in English, and then the first song I learned in Dakota also had a lot of meaning and helped ground me here.
More you'd like to say?
What? Oldies. Jeremiah was a bullfrog. My grandma gave me a transistor radio when I was 7, and so I would put it under my pillow at night, and I ran through 9-volt batteries. I had to start babysitting so I could buy my own batteries for my radio, but that's like imprinted in my brain, all the 60s, 70s music. My daughter, well, whenever we would travel, I would always play the oldies when we were in the car. So when the movie Babe came out and the little mice sang Blue Moon, Erin knew all the words, and her friends are like, how do you know that song? She said, I don't know. We've just always sang it to the radio. Well, thank you so much. This has been wonderful to be here along the river.
Thank you so much. So I did take a count while we were doing the Q&A, and there's enough books for all the folks here. So Gwen will be hanging out right over here signing some books. Feel free to come and grab a free book. Again, thanks to the Minnesota Humanities Center and to Gwen for coming. This has been really wonderful. Help yourself to snacks too before you leave.
Yes.
And again, bathrooms are still open. The exit will be the way you entered. Thank you again.
And if you have a heritage language, use the words you know. You don't have to be fluent to use the words you know. If it's the words your grandma taught you, use them.